Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayer TFT Synergies Tier List video. Today our analysts will be ranking each synergy from S all the way down to the D tier. While this list is about the impact each trait has on the meta, keep in mind that the meta is quite diverse right now. Due to that, there's not actually much of a gap between each tier. With that said, let's get into it. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our GiantSlayer TFT social media pages. Let's get back to the video, and to start off, we've got S tier, which consists of Mercenary, Valkyrie, Void, Brawler, and Demolitionist. This tier is all about synergies that are dominating the current meta. At the top of S tier, we have Mercenary. This trait remains at the top of the tier list because Misfortune and Gangplank are still such dominant champions in the meta. While they can be difficult to 2-star because they are so contested, when you are able to get them fully upgraded, including the Mercenary upgrades, they can hard carry the late game. The Mercenary upgrades are a big reason as to why these two champions are dominating the late game. Being able to enhance their ultimates multiple ways causes such an impact on how much influence Gangplank and Misfortune have in each team fight. Next up is another trait affecting Misfortune, Valkyrie. Valkyrie is back as well in the S tier because Kayle, Misfortune, and to a lesser extent Kayle are still doing extremely well in the meta. Kayle in particular influences the meta by a lot, and Valkyrie increases her effectiveness, making it a valuable trait to play anytime you're running Kayle. Alongside Kayle is Misfortune, who we've already praised for her Mercenary upgrades and amazing late game AoE. Kayle is more niche as she's generally only played in the mech Infiltrator build, but she's one of the most important aspects for that comp. Overall, Valkyrie is a trait that has both strong champions and elevates those champions to be even stronger. Alright, moving along to our next synergy, we've got Void. Oh boy, has Void really taken over the meta. It was already happening in 10.10, but in 10.11, even with the nerfs to Kha'Zix, this trait is really dominating. You know a trait and its champions are good when you can have multiple players running it in a game and several of them manage to top 4 despite being contested. Kha'Zix really carries this trait through the mid game, and then later on, you have Vel'Koz who melts away the enemy board. Cho'Gath is the only Void champion that struggles, but even then, he's still useful with an AoE stun. True damage basically has no counter, and when you combine strong single target damage like Kha'Zix with good AoE in Vel'Koz, you have an incredible synergy. Brawler is the next synergy that pairs well with Void and serves as a flexible frontline for multiple comps. A flat health increase isn't easily countered in the meta, whereas Vanguard, which is purely armor-based defensive stats, can be bypassed by magic damage and items like Last Whisper. Yes, high health targets do have items and champions that do well against them, but overall having more health tends to be more versatile. On top of the trait being itself good, the champions are also great. Vi, Blitzcrank, and Cho'Gath all do some sort of CC, making them easy to fit into a lot of comps. Malphite may not CC or do much damage, but he can certainly take a punch as he's one tanky rock. Brawler deserves its spot in the S tier by being a versatile trait with a variety of useful champions. And coming in at the bottom of the S tier, we have Demolitionist. Demolitionist isn't a trait you're going to run every game, but it's incredibly useful when you do. Mainly, this synergy serves to enhance Gangplank as his already powerful AoE becomes even stronger by making it a stun. So really, Demolitionist deserves S tier almost entirely because of how much it helps Gangplank be even stronger. But it's not the only reason why, as it also makes Kayle a better carry in mech Infiltrator, and Ziggs is a viable carry option throughout the early and mid game. Alright, with the S tier out of the way, let's get into the A tier, which consists of Chrono, Celestial, Blademaster, Blaster, Sorcerer, Mana Reaver, and Infiltrator. This tier is all about above average synergies that have a strong impact on the meta. Kicking off the A tier, we have Chrono. Chrono is by far one of the most flexible and commonly splashed traits in the game. While 4 and 6 Chrono aren't played as often, 2 Chrono is seen in almost every single composition. Providing an initial boost of speed to all of your champions is super helpful and always has value. Alongside the synergy itself, there are many champions that are viable and easy to play play in the meta. All of the Chrono champions are viable in one way or another, which is quite amazing considering that there's 7 of them. All in all, this synergy is easily the best splash trait in the current meta. Speaking of splash traits, up next we have Celestial. While 2 Celestial isn't as common as 2 Chrono, it's still a highly valuable synergy for a lot of comps. With Shredder being weaker after several nerfs in 10-11, it's not as common to see 4 Celestials played, but 2 Celestials are still doing quite well. Much like Chrono, this trait also has extremely versatile champions, with Lulu and Kassadin being 2 of the best mid to late game additions for any composition. Basically, if you plan to play any build relying on a carry that auto attacks, you should definitely consider adding in Celestial. Up next, let's talk about Blademaster. Blademaster is an interesting trait because the champions have far more of an impact than the synergy itself. Kayle, Aurelia, Shen, and Xayah are all staples of the meta, so it's rare to see them played without Blademaster. This makes it so Blademaster is almost played often by happenstance, as it's just a common pairing with those meta champions. But with that said, it serves to empower those units and does increase their effectiveness, which makes it an impactful trait. Similar to Blademaster, we have Blaster. Blaster is similar because, like Blademaster, the champions matter much more than the synergy itself. Jinx is one of the more common mid-game 4-cost carries, and Miss Fortune dominates the late game. Graves is also quite versatile with his ability, and Ezreal is a Chrono, making him easy to splash in. Blaster itself serves mainly to make those units more effective, and as such, does have an impact on the meta, even if it's overshadowed by its champions. Moving right along, we've got another splash-like trait, Sorcerer. Sorcerer is in an interesting spot in the meta because while it has uses, it's also fallen a bit out of favor compared to a lot of physical traits like Chrono, Celestial, and Blademaster. So why is it in the A tier? Well, mainly because splashing 2 Sorcerers is easy to do and provides a ton of value. For just 2 units, you get a 20% increase to ability power for all of your champions, which is extremely effective. So whether you're running it for Xerath or Vel'Koz, or even just to boost the damage of Gangplank or Miss Fortune, you're also giving value to your entire team. Because of that, it makes Sorcerer more worthwhile than a lot of other synergies. Nearing the end of the A tier, up next is Mana Reaver. Mana Reaver is one of those traits that silently does a lot of work. Being able to slow down an enemy champion from casting can often be all it takes to win a round. Not only is the effect of the trait strong, it also comes with great champions like Kassadin, Aurelia, and Thresh, all of which are common in the meta. It's not an essential synergy, but it does outperform a lot of other traits when added to any composition. For the last trait in A tier, we've got Infiltrator. Infiltrator has certainly fallen off in 10-11, mainly due to the change in how they function. Now, instead of waiting a moment before jumping, Infiltrators will instead immediately do so, and because of that, players can now position against them. This makes Infiltrators less reliable than in previous metas. But the trait is still doing well because of how punishing it is against poor positioning and the fact that 2 of the champions are also great carries. Time to move on to the B tier, which consists of Mech Pilot, Cybernetic, Vanguard, Rebel, Mystic, Sniper, and Space Pirate. This tier is for the synergies that are really just average. They aren't bad, but they don't have the same impact in the meta as the traits above them. Up first, we have Mech Pilot. Mech is almost always paired with Infiltrator. That pairing is really what hurts it the most because it's not flexible enough to do well with other synergies and relies heavily on Kai'Sa as well as 3-starring Annie and Rumble. Despite being quite inflexible, the Super Mech is still extremely powerful with full items and several 3-stars. It's just no longer the consistently dominant force it once was, which is why the trait has fallen down to the B tier. Cybernetics is up next in the B tier as a trait that is versatile but generally not that impactful. Aurelia can be a great carry and 6 Cybernetics can still do okay, but neither are really essential in the current meta. Overall, you're likely to see 3 Cybernetics a fair amount, but as a whole, the trait is rarely going to carry a game, though it can occasionally happen. Moving on down the list, we've got Vanguard. 2 Vanguard is a fantastic synergy early game and has a ton of influence over how that part of the game plays out. But that's really the only time that the trait has a lot of impact on the game and meta. For Vanguard can be okay for Jhin carry games, but generally you'll only see Jace with Wukong later in the game. This synergy definitely suffers from having only a few viable late game champions while also getting countered by magic damage and Last Whisper. Rebel is a trait that has great champions with Ziggs, Malphite, and Jinx, but doesn't do much otherwise. Extra shields and damage is nice, but the impact of this trait is far less than its champions, making it a solid average synergy. There are a lot of really great splash traits that can consider, and Mystic is one of them. But the issue with Mystic is that you don't always need it. Not every situation needs extra magic resist compared to, say, Chrono, where the boost of attack speed is always useful. Sniper is up next, and it should be noted that Jhin, Ashe, and Caitlyn are amazing champions in the current meta, especially Jhin. Unfortunately, they are amazing on their own and not because of Sniper. Sniper is a nice boost for them, but it's an average trait at best, and the champions have far more impact on the meta. And for our last trait in B tier, we have Space Pirates. Honestly, this synergy is great when you get it early on in the game, as making extra gold is helpful. Outside of that situation, and in Space Jam, it just doesn't really have much of a place. There are niche situations where Force Space Pirates does well, but you already have to be winning the game for it to be playable, making it unreliable in the majority of games. We're almost done, but we've got 2 more tiers to go through, starting with C tier, which consists of Darkstar, Protector, and Star Guardian. These are synergies that are below average most games, and while they have a place in the meta, they aren't anywhere near as essential as a lot of the other synergies. At the top of C tier, we have Darkstar. Darkstar is another trait with fantastic champions like Xerath, Jhin, and Lux. These are staple champions of the meta, but Darkstar really has no part in what makes those units viable. It basically serves as a minor buff to them, but ultimately isn't essential to win games when running a Jhin or Xerath carry. Protectors are all the way down in C tier, as they really get outperformed by both Vanguard and Brawler as frontline options. Rakan and Jarvan are amazing champions in the right situation, but that isn't enough to raise the value of the synergy. Overall, there are definitely times where running 2 Protectors is viable, but it's never a trait you really need to have in order to do well in a game. Lastly, for C tier, we have Star Guardian. Basically, this synergy is completely overshadowed by Sorcerer. A lot of the champions within the trait are also in Sorcerer, and Sorcerer has way more impact in fights than Star Guardian does. That said, it does have a place in the meta and can be useful, it's just not making anywhere near as big of a splash as Sorcerer does. Alright folks, we've made it to the end of the tier list with the D tier. Once again, this tier is entirely for Starship. Unfortunately, Aurelion Sol is still not that great of a champion. Sure, he can be played in Rebels, but he really doesn't matter much for that comp, and the fact remains he's never useful outside of Rebels. Maybe with the mid-season update, he'll finally soar to the upper echelons of the tier list. That's all we have for today's tier list video. As we said in the introduction, the meta right now is quite diverse, so most of the traits are viable, it just depends on the composition and situation. Let us know in the comment section below what synergies you think should be higher or lower on the list. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.